This is You the People. Each week, us three Canadians talk about you, the people. Your politics, your political system, your White House-based political conventions, and yes, your upcoming election. And with me, as always, Corey Hogan, Stephen Carter. Guys, what's going on?
Happy convention night, Zane.
It has
Happy America night.
This is it. This is a national holiday.
USA.
Mark it down. August 27th will be America night.
Zane, I think it is a national holiday in the States because I'm pretty sure I saw fireworks over the Washington Monument earlier tonight.
That's right. It has to be a holiday.
It is America is Great Night, America Night for short. National holiday. I mean, with that rousing 73-minute speech that we were all, I mean, we as Canadians had the option of watching it. I believe it was something that folks in the U.S. did not. I felt like you had to watch it as part of the mandatory America Night, America Day celebrations. I feel like that's just straight into your veins, straight into the jugular.
Well, I think the way we're going for Trump's second re-election campaign in 2024, it may be mandatory.
Yeah,
the way we're just knocking down these things.
Will there even be a campaign, or are we just going to rubber stamp that through the post office? You know, that we'll just...
Oh, there you go, Carter. Nicely
there I
done.
go, you know?
We've got
I'm pretty sparky tonight. Let's get going.
We have got so much to discuss, but first the headlines from USA Today. Okay, here we go. Here's one right off, fresh off the press, I should say. Twitter creatively reimagines First Lady Melania Trump's RNC green screen dress. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this, but she wore this lime green dress, and for something that was planned so, I mean, I can't say it was planned well, but for something that was planned, how did they get away with this? And because this is the 101 mistake of political stagecraft. Corey, thoughts?
Yeah, this is like in the last 10 years for sure. You know better than to wear a green tie, green shirt, green dress, because the internet is ruthless and the internet will do its internet things. I couldn't believe how quickly I was seeing on Twitter memes of essentially green screening her dress.
Like
minutes.
less than 10, yeah.
Less than 10, and all of a sudden there's COVID statistics on her dress as she's walking down.
Yes.
There are like almost like these Rube Goldberg-esque like elaborate designs of her in them. It was crazy. The internet remains undefeated.
You liberal cucks. You didn't even see the genius of it. I mean, she comes out there looking all Fidel Castro. She knows what she's doing. She's setting the stage for, for tonight. For the all hail the green.
What are we talking about tonight?
Well,
this is the moment where Stephen Carter's going to betray the fact he actually did not watch anything.
What the fuck are you talking about, dude? She wore military green when she spoke. She literally wore a tarp that was used for green screen tonight. Like, I mean, much better shape than I had. A great dress, but
no, I can't get past the military one. I mean, the military one was everything for me. There's two green outfits. It's too much.
God, we'll let you. Well, okay, great. Thank you for your.
This is going to be a great podcast, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Stephen. Yeah, thank you.
You at
home at least know the facts, unlike Stephen, who's trying to figure them out while we speak.
No, it's like so you said, good. Corey,
so good. Be an ongoing theme. Okay, let's move it to our next headline, and this one I'll walk you through, Stephen, because I feel like you'll need the cause.
Okay.
So this one comes from Politico. Biden snags Creep America Great domain in latest act of Trump trolling. So the Biden campaign has actually found keepamericagreat.com. It was expired, and they bought it up, and they now currently own Trump's campaign slogan. The joy that will come from political domain squatting and trolling going forward. Stephen, any reactions to what you just heard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have seen this, and it is a pretty dark little website that's up there. Touting the broken promises of Donald Trump. I don't think this actually matters that much. I mean, there was I thought that these types of days were over. Here in Canada, we had Dave Cournoyer, who did this to one of our premiers. I thought that every campaign just nailed down all of the iterations of their campaign themes early. The fact that the Trump campaign didn't just kind of shows us that there's not really much of a campaign there. The first things that we do in a campaign are nail down the domain names. This is just showcasing for me that Trump's campaign continues to be run by a group of amateurs.
Corey, what do you think?
Well, these things are funny, but do they really matter? Is anyone out there being like, I think I'm just going to try, I'm looking for Donald Trump's website. I could use Google like everybody else in the world, but instead I think I'm just going to start throwing in random slogans.com. Yeah, let's just see if that works. No, but listen, if the Biden campaign does not have that redirected towards the website for the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, they are blowing it.
Well, they don't. They currently actually they have made their own very extensive Democrat-style policy-heavy landing page. So, Corey, I hope they hear some of your advice, because the best troll would be a quick forward to a website. Let me go to our final headline. This comes straight from the wires. A serious story scaffolded by some hilarity. White House's Jared Kushner says he will be the one to reach out to NBA superstar LeBron James. So there is so much context here, which is the guy with so many portfolios. And let me tell you something. He's knocking these off. Like, he killed it with healthcare. Israel, Palestine,
literally.
two-state, the two-state solution that he did with Israel and Palestine. Amazing.
Oh my God.
Social justice reform, criminal justice reform, both knocked off. So now the race issue and Jared Kushner, he has got it solved, guys. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, after his great success with his business bros to stop COVID and the way he brought peace to the Middle East, which Trump was bragging about today, by the way. I'm sure we'll get to that. I mean, why not give the golden boy another shot at this? I mean, absolutely. You know what? Maybe he can call up his friend, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and they can get a three-way call, and let's just rock this out. Let's just have like a greatest Jared Kushner's hits.
I want it to be in person, though. I want it to be in person, and I want there to be a camera crew, and I want to see the actual video. I mean,
the decision, too.
Yeah, this would be great. We turn it into a 30-minute show. It'll be fantastic. I mean,
I've decided to take my talents to outside of the bubble.
That's right.
This underlies a couple of big problems in the Trump administration. He doesn't have advisors. He has his son-in-law, and the son-in-law, has been given, I mean, you listed them off, Corey, all the major files. And they've been failure after failure after failure. But you know what? Let's send them into the NBA. Cause, LeBron James is going to take, words of wisdom on race relations from Jared Kushner. Like, come on. This is ridiculous. Just children. They're children.
I want to, before we move on, I want to get your guys' quick thoughts on what we are seeing in the NBA, right? Where, this very swift move started by the Milwaukee Bucks, then leading into the both of the Los Angeles teams. Corey, as an NBA fan, I'm going to go to you first because you probably have more context. Steven, you can come up with your one NBA fact in the time that Corey and I chat about this. But what are you kind of seeing and what are you sensing? And do you feel like the bubble environment has kind of catalyzed some of this, perhaps the way we may not have seen if the league was normal and dispersed like it usually is geographically, at least?
Well, I absolutely believe that the bubble environment has catalyzed this, both with the time that you have available and you were there with your colleagues and you have a lot of time, I suspect, to think about these things. There's like one lame nightclub, I think, in the bubble and a bunch of activities that they don't invite people to. And, it seems like it's really an opportunity for people to think heavily about these issues. And obviously when you're the Bucks, it's, it's right there in your backyard. And, LeBron James has always been very big on social justice. You can say a lot of things about how he, cramps up at inopportune times and has maybe, GM LeBron has not been the force in the league that he's wanted, but those are basketball things. When it comes to social justice, the guy's record is unimpeachable. And I am not surprised that he would take a leadership position on this. The Bucks may have started it, but the king, LeBron James, he's going to decide in a very real way the course, not just of this season, but of this league going forward.
Carter, what do you think? This is like a merger of so many things. It's the COVID environment compounded with, of course, police brutality, this upcoming election and the backdrop of a sport dominated by African Americans, and then the further backdrop of the RNC happening at the exact same time.
Yeah, I mean, this is the political moment. I mean, unfortunately, there's a list of names that are far too long of people who have been attacked by police, but the NBA and the NBA players have been there at every step of the way in a way that I'll just pick on the NFL. The NFL hasn't been. Colin Kaepernick has suffered immeasurably because of his protests, and I think it has something to do with also the star culture of the NBA and the smaller rosters. With a huge roster in the NFL, it is easier to kind of replace these stars, or to move a Colin Kaepernick out and to isolate and to attack these players in a way that the NBA, the players just have more power, and they've been wielding it. This isn't Johnny come lately. They have been wielding this power, on social justice issues. And of course, LeBron James is the name that everybody's going to come with, but the league itself is far more engaged and involved. And I was also super impressed with the speed with which the WNBA moved. There were a bunch of MLS soccer in the United States also canceled their games.
A couple of MLB games. Yep.
Yeah. The ones that didn't, though, were, the NHL.
Can I ask you about the NHL? Like, I would be remiss if I didn't. Offer your comments on that.
Well, it's frustrating because it's a very different league, obviously. And for us as Canadians, the NHL is populated, the remaining teams in the NHL playoffs are about 50% Canadian. So Canadians, very involved in the NHL, a lot of international players. But unlike the NFL and the NBA, not very politically active. It has been a very politically inactive league. These players have gone to the White House under Trump to be recognized in a way that some of the players have taken political stands not going to the White House. The NHL, it doesn't have the history of political activism. And I think that that's where we really need to start seeing shifts. Even the Olympics is trying to minimize the political activism of the athlete. And that's a mistake. The political activism of the athlete is a huge opportunity for sport in general, because leagues like the NBA that have political action kind of now starting to be baked into their DNA are stronger leagues, and they have a stronger relationship, I believe, with their fans, because it's about shared values, not just a shared love for a game. And I think this is going to be a turning point. And I loved watching the announcers. I loved watching the players. I loved watching everything that happened in the last 48 hours around the sports coming together. And I wish I could have seen it. I wish there was a documentary film crew that was following this, and maybe there will be at some point in the future. But if there was a documentary film crew that could capture what happened in that bubble, I think that would be instrumental learning for the future.
Carter's pitching a 30 for 30 without even knowing it.
Without even knowing what 30 for 30 is.
Yeah, exactly. Corey,
I watched the 30 for 30. Oh, bastards.
Well, okay, there you go. You just gave it away. You just gave it away, Carter. Corey, I want to go to you and conclude on this topic, and we need to discuss a lot more about this, the shooting of Jacob Blake that kind of has led and catalyzed some of this as well. And I will offer one comment, which is the NHL has, in recent memory, also had its own problems with race, right? If you recall, us three Calgarians, our head coach here got fired for past comments that he made against an African American player, and I think it's perhaps at a very different, to your point, Carter, in a different spot, both with political activisms, but also perhaps with accepting and having these conversations of race that I'd say have been much more vibrant and necessary in other leagues. Corey, any thoughts to what Carter said, or anything that you've heard thus far?
Well, first I would say shockingly cogent sports analysis by Stephen Carter. We know what he was. we know what he was doing instead of watching the Republican convention. That's for sure.
It's always more fun to watch sports.
And we should acknowledge the NHL has postponed to Saturday now their playoffs in protest against racism and police brutality. That happened after, I think it's fair to say, a fair bit of pressure, given their kind of laggard status amongst the sports leagues. But this is not going away. This is growing. And to Stephen's point about it's connecting with the fans, it's also reflecting the fans and their desires. And this is the expectation that fans put on, I have no doubt that these are things that LeBron James and others in the NBA feel very passionate about, but they are also hearing about it. They're hearing about it from their fans on a daily basis. You've got to use your power to do something. And they are doing something, and they are absolutely doing something.
Alrighty, let's move it on to our first segment. You have to pledge your allegiance. Oh, goodness.
Under God, no less.
Under something, yeah. And we'll discuss what that something is. Corey, let's start with you. I mean, we had 4 nights of the Democratic Convention last week when we recorded. We analyzed Biden's speech. We'll kind of take the same tact this week. We'll do some overarching analysis of what we saw in the first 3 nights, and then we'll deep dive into what we saw with Trump, because there's so much to unpack there. So give me your overall thoughts on the convention. You know, there's a few things we threw out on the table last time, so I'll maybe reintroduce it for you guys. You know, we talked about what needed to be pre-production versus live. We had that debate. And perhaps the Democrats second-guessed themselves around, did everything need to be live that went live? You had Joe Biden pop up between, Monday to Wednesday, and then finally culminate on Thursday, moderating roundtables. We had the everyman conversation, how good some of them were, how poor others were. So, but some of those things kind of as contrast pieces. Perhaps, Corey, I'll throw it to you in terms of your general reaction to what you saw this week, both from a stagecraft perspective. Let's exclude the Trump speech for a second, and then also from a content perspective and how it kind of jived with what we saw last week.
So let's get the stagecraft out of the way. I think they did a better job with stagecraft than the DNC. I think there were certain things that they maybe they didn't obviously learn from, but they did, in stark contrast to the DNC, way better transitions. I think the graphics and polish were generally better. I do believe the live audiences added a positive element to many of the speeches. I still think on the net, not to scoop myself, that Biden's speech was significantly better than Trump's for reasons I'll get into. But, setting aside the stagecraft, which they executed very well, the content was much more of a mixed bag. I talked last time about how the Democrats seemed to be creating themes that they came back to, and there was a lot more, I think, discipline on the story they were telling about Joe Biden. Now, you have the benefit with Joe Biden of not necessarily, this again, despite the fact he was vice president, having as baked opinions as you do about Donald Trump. But the convention, even tonight, just to use an example, it ping-ponged from international affairs to police to criminal justice reform in a totally different approach than what they were talking about on police to let's now talk about childcare. And it was a little all over the map. And I'm not necessarily sure that was to the Republicans' advantage. I do think it suffered from... I think there was a great team behind the scenes, and I think it suffered from direction, not production. Let's put it that way.
Carter, what do you think? Overarching thoughts? What worked for you?
I do think the production was better. I mean, even just something as simple as the fireworks and the end of the speech today just was better. The Trump 2020, it was visually more interesting. Obviously, when you stage your fireworks around the Washington Monument, you're also getting quite a visual impact. I mean, it was.
Are you
visually
telling me
impactful.
That's better than a parking lot in Delaware? I just want to get that on the record. Okay.
A little bit.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure the New York Times 50 places to visit just ranks it properly.
A smidgen higher.
Good.
But I think that the language also, I thought that the DNC was really well scripted. It was scripted at each stage, and you could see where you were trying to achieve. This one felt a little more, I don't want to say ad hoc, because obviously it was scripted as well, but because they weren't speaking to me, because the language wasn't designed to appeal to me, I found it very challenging to try and put together some of the through lines. The fear piece was so prevalent that I found it very off-putting, because obviously when we're talking about race and fear and, guns and violence, I kind of come down on one side of that. I can't separate my own personal values away from it and just say, and look at it as objectively as I'd like to for the purposes of this podcast. So it's harder for me to look at some of these things that are being said and see some of the messaging. I find myself falling into the Daniel Dale, CNN critique of, was that true or was that false? Because it's something that I can easily get my head into. Where I need to be is, was it effective or not effective? And, Corey and I were texting back and forth, and effectiveness is something that if you're not the intended target audience, it can be very difficult to judge how effective a message is because it wasn't designed to speak to you.
Yeah, Corey, what do you think of that? Like, and frankly, I'd be curious to get your take as to what you saw the division of message, and what I mean by that is, who was this convention designed for? Some of it seemed to be for the base, but some of it seemed to be for accessible voters. And what did you kind of make of that mix that they tried to strive for as well?
Oh, I think it was a very accessible convention to a low information voter. And that's not a dig at all.
Yeah.
Most voters are low information voters. I think the Republicans did a very good job of putting together a very compelling story. But it was a story, to Stephen's point. If you want to fact check that convention, it was a dumpster fire from like a truth point of view. And this really does speak to one of the challenges that the Democrats have. And I don't want to get all righteous and high and mighty about it, but I've talked about this in the context of social media ads before. If you are not moored by reality, if you are not, and look, every political party is going to stretch and focus and all of those things, but there were just sort of outright falsehoods here. And if you don't care about that, if you're willing to do those outright falsehoods, and you know that the person you're targeting towards is unlikely to go to the trouble of fact-checking it after, very, very compelling, very strong cases. The stuff they did about criminal justice in particular, where they talked about the Democratic cities in shambles, very questionable whether that is the case, of course. But it was very compelling content, and it did remind me a lot of Donald Trump's speech in 2016 to that effect. But it also was just a lie, right? Rudy Giuliani talking about American cities in shambles, unlike when he was mayor. When he was mayor, the last year he was mayor, I looked this up, there were 673 murders in New York. Last year in New York, last full statistic year, there were 319. So he's talking about de Blasio running this city into like murder central, but the reality is there were half as many murders under de Blasio as there was under Rudy Giuliani. And that's, I think it's illustrative. I didn't go to the trouble of fact-checking everything that was said. It just seemed incredulous to me knowing general trends in crime. So I thought I would pull that one up. There were a lot of lies. I had, one of those streams from the New York Times open on one of my screens here. And I think the fact-checkers were, 30 minutes behind it sometimes. They just could not keep up with some of these falsehoods.
And it wasn't just Trump, right? Like this was layered on throughout the entire 4 nights, which was this permission to lie. This saying, tell the best story you can, who gives a shit about the facts, almost was a mandate, it seemed like, from this convention. Well,
and so I think that's something that we've got to grapple with when you're watching it. And it's just this fully produced commercial that does not require to adhere to any kind of truth in advertising. It's alarming. It's alarming what you might get in a situation like that. So, like I said, production, good, direction, bad, individual components, very good, in the sense of persuasion, not in the sense of, righteous or good in a conventional sense.
Sure.
And serious Michael Bay energy to the produced parts, right? Like just big,
triumphant music. Yeah, absolutely.
Very Hollywood.
Carter, any speakers that stuck out for you? There's a lot of them. Some of them were clearly professional political communicators. Others, they had that everyman vibe. They had Corey, give me the names again of the two St. Louis.
McCloskeys.
Which, by the way, I'm sure they'll have a gun named after them soon if they don't already. But what did you kind of make of their mix between professional political communicators versus the everyman approach? I'm kind of curious to hear if there's any person or particular style of communication that stuck out to you.
I was struck actually by the McCloskeys because I was struck that, in a normal political environment, when you have a city in Wisconsin on fire, basically because of gun violence by police, the core of the Black Lives Matter discussion, in a normal political sense and in normal political rules, the McCloskeys aren't invited to speak, or if they were invited to speak, they're hastily removed from the program. This is not, they didn't do that because they're not playing by any of the traditional rules. There was a speaker removed from the program who had tweeted a conspiracy theory earlier in the day. I can't remember the name of the speaker. It's one of the inconsequential numbers. But their primary pieces they kept in place. They called their shot. They put all the Trumps up. They put all of the different relations to the Trump. I can't remember the names of all of the speakers because they're a lot of them are forgettable. There's no
one white person blends into the other very easily. That's what I've realized. I can say that with my experience.
But there were some black speakers, right?
There were actually quite a few.
Yeah, I mean they filled. Forgive me for this. They filled the quota. They put the numbers up. They put up the female speakers. They had, the woman who, again, the names, I'm just not good at these names, but the woman who was advocating household voting, you just follow your husband. That speaker was there. I mean, this is the Republican Party right now. And the speakers blended together to a degree because they didn't say anything particularly profound. They instead took the talking points that they were supposed to give. They talked about America being divided. They talked about fear, and they told some truths and they told some lies. And they did their job, which was each one of them was chosen to speak to a specific audience, and they did. And they spoke to that audience, and I don't know if it'll be successful. I don't know who was watching. I do know that yesterday the ratings for the major networks, the television ratings were much lower for the Republican convention than they were for the same night for the Democratic convention. But regardless, this isn't people aren't going to primarily get their messaging from the television. They're going to get their messaging from the packaging, and the packaging, the Republican campaigns have lots of things to pick from. Whatever they were trying to communicate, it was said in this convention, and they'll be able to disseminate this information to their voters. That was their objective. They achieved it. And from that point of view, it has to be construed as a success.
Corey, I'm going to ask you that same question. Any particular speakers or, tones that stuck out to you or that you found particularly interesting from what you saw, and perhaps even in contrast with the DNC?
Yeah, the night one was interesting in not all in positive ways, but that was when Don Jr. was there and Kimberly Guilfoyle. I can never remember her name. That was weird. Those were both high energy, and I mean high energy. I don't mean high energy. Kind of speeches where they came out and just sounded totally surreal. I'm so sad that Stephen talked about Abby Johnson before. She's the one who advocated the head of household voting. She also made a comment that her adopted brown son was more likely to commit a crime than her white children, and I think that's just abhorrent for a lot of reasons, but that somebody with views like that would be invited onto a stage, even if you've moderated their language and smoothed off the edges for the actual speech, I think tells you a lot of what you need to know about the current state of the GOP and just how there are no red lines anymore. Well, apparently there's one. It's you can't do conspiracy theories about Jewish cabals, so I guess thank God that one still stands. But it was a weird. It came in strong with a weird energy on night one, and I would say nights 2 and 3 were pretty forgettable for me, and then tonight was quite memorable, but for maybe different reasons than the DNC. The total breaking of norms, obviously, I'm sure we're going to talk about the idea that you would give a speech from the White House. But as far as the speakers go, look, going in, we knew it, and it was certainly true during it. Not a really stellar speaker list. A lot of people with the last name Trump, and the actual speeches were not all that compelling. And and I don't know that they needed to be. A friend of mine said about
why do you think they didn't need to be? I think that's an interesting point you just made.
Well, because I don't actually believe it was designed to be seen all at once. It was designed, if you tuned in for any bit of it, you would see basically a version of the same message. And maybe that's why they kept jumping around grab bag style rather than developing themes, because it's like, hey, if you catch 30 minutes of the convention, you're going to get the whole story. You're going to get criminal justice. You're going to get the strongest economy. You're going to get America is so respected in the world.
Just a different messenger. Yeah,
I just want to say, a friend of mine said about Trump's speech that it was filled with metaphors he'd expect to read in a grade 8 English short story assignment. And I think that's kind of true of all of the speakers. None of them, I think, got to the level of true great oratory. I'm not sure they were shooting for that, though. I think they were really going for, you can understand it. If you only catch a bit of it, it makes sense to you, and move on. And I think it was fairly effective on that front.
Carter?
Well, and I just think that we need to understand that this is Trump has cast himself in the celebrity role. Like he is the celebrity. There is no need to bring in other speakers. There's no need to bring in, the big names that are going to carry this, because he knows that he can carry it. You know, when Dana White is your biggest celebrity today, the head of the UFC, that tells you a lot about what they're trying to do. He's got his regular cast of characters, but he thinks of his entire presidency as a television show. He's the star, and he's choosing who his supporting cast is. He's starting with his family, and then he moves out 1 or 2 degrees. I mean, there were some senators yesterday. Where's Mitch McConnell? Like, how's he not there? Where's Lindsey Graham? These people, the sycophants that have lined up to protect him aren't helping him. I mean, yes, Matt Gaetz from Florida's there. Jim Jordan from Ohio's there, from Congress. But this was not a stellar lineup by any stretch of the imagination, nor was it that everyman lineup that we saw with the Democrats, where they put the everyman forward. These aren't every men and women. These are typecast characters out of central casting.
Let's move it on to the Trump speech. And Corey, I'm going to start with you. You know, when we talked about the Biden speech last week, we spent a fair amount of time on this conversation regarding expectations. And so give me your sense of where you think the expectations were, perhaps as an extension to the comments you just made about the quality of the speeches from the other speakers regarding Trump's speech, because it was pretty clear that, expectations for Biden were low, and he over-delivered. I think a week later, we're now starting to see that narrative gel in about the Biden speech in terms of its resonance and delivery and how it landed. But tell me where you think the expectations for the Trump speech were heading into tonight.
I think the Democrats did a good job of not setting expectations for the Trump speech. They didn't try to lower them. They allowed them to sort of land where they are. I still think that Trump exceeded expectations.
Why do you think that's a good strategy, by the way? Why, I'm just kind of curious to unpack
because if you say Donald Trump's going to come out like a raving madman, he will do a speech like tonight. And for the most part, he was not a raving madman. I mean, he broke all of the rules in the book. But he was very subdued. Many people have commented that, and I think they're right, it was much more like his approach to a State of the Union than a Trump rally. Mm-hmm. And that is consistent with how he did his 2016 acceptance, by the way. Very, very similar in that sense. Mm-hmm. And that was always sort of destined to be. So I don't know what expectations you would try to set. No one's going to believe if you're going to sit there and be like, oh, well, he's a great orator. He's going to really lift the ceiling here. So they just kept their mouth shut. They let Trump be Trump. And I think that because he was on every night of the convention, which we didn't really mention, but Donald Trump every night was involved in some way, shape, or form in a big way. There wasn't anything kind of special about his appearance, and I think that was fundamentally one of the problems that he had with his appearance. But it was fine. If you watch that saying, well, I'm going to tune in and see if Donald Trump is this monster that he's sometimes portrayed to be, you probably wouldn't come away thinking that. You would think he loves America, and you would think, look at all these things he did, because again, keep in mind, he's not being moored by the truth or what's actually happened here. No politician really is, but him, I think more so than most. And you would walk away probably not thinking any differently from Donald Trump if you liked him, and maybe even liking him a little more if you didn't.
Carter, let's talk about expectations from your vantage point. What do you think? Do you agree with the Democrats' strategy? But secondly, tell me where you think they were actually pinned, the expectations. Where were they pinned for Donald Trump heading into tonight?
Well, first of all, no one's going to believe you if you start to set the expectations high for Trump. We expect Trump will do one of the best speeches he's ever done. Okay. Well, that's still that grade 8 level, it's not, oh, well, he's really going to knock it out of the park. So they did the right thing. They didn't try and set expectations high for him. But at the same time, frankly, he could have come out in clown shoes and we would have said, well, that's just Donald. It wouldn't have really changed our perception of him. So I think that, this is the challenge of being the Democrats in this situation. Anytime you play expectations, he's going to subvert them in some fashion. And it's not like he's not a known quantity. He is exactly who he is all the time. So just let him be that. Biden does his game. Biden stayed out of the way, put Harris up to smack down Trump before he spoke today. That was good. That's, to me, the right DNC strategy, and probably the right RNC strategy. So let's go. Here we go. Democrats versus Republicans. I think both emerged from their conventions stronger than maybe I expected them to. So now what? And that's going to be the narrative moving forward.
Corey, let's talk stagecraft, and let's start with the obvious, the White House. Give me your thoughts. Using the White House for a presidential nomination speech, a partisan speech, despite the subdued tone. We can talk about all the nuances, but the White House. Start there.
Well, let's start with the obvious. It's one hell of a backdrop. It's very storied. You had those flags there. You had the literal White House. You had the lawn of the White House. You had the Washington Monument in the background. That money can't buy that, right? That's as good of a backdrop as you're going to get. But let's talk a bit about why everybody is pulling their hair out about this, because I think sometimes people say, is this really such an extension of what is done in politics all of the time? He's the president. He does things that have political advantage to him in the White House all of the time. People have thrown around the Hatch Act a lot, the idea that you can't politicize the public service, this notion that the only people who are allowed to engage in political activity are the president and the vice president because of the nature of their roles. The appointees are not even allowed to go to conventions under the Hatch Act. The whole rows were filled with his effing cabinet. I mean, it was a serious blurring of state and party. And
Pompeo spoke, for example, on the nights before. That was also part of that narrative.
Seriously. But I really want to sort of lay out on the record here why that is so alarming. And it's the same reason why America felt compelled when it was founded to say there must be a separation of church and state. The combination of adherence to an ideology and adherence to the country have to remain separate. Because if you don't, you get this weird blurring where all of a sudden you're not sufficiently loyal to the party, you're not sufficiently loyal to the nation. And obviously rhetoric is always along those lines. That's un-American. You've heard people say forever when people fight over what America is. But when you have the actual symbols of the nation so intermeshed with the symbols of a political party, I mean, there's a lot of countries that do that, and you're not going to like any of them. You don't want to live in any of them. You go to China, you're going to see the Communist Party symbols right there in the state. They're embedded on the flag, for crying out loud. You go to Nazi Germany, not to break Godwin's law so bloody early, but the Reichstag has the swastika in it. It doesn't have the flag of Germany at the time, or they changed it eventually. And countries do this when they stop giving a damn that the country is different from the party. And that's a very alarming place to be in, because we all know what the next steps are there. And it doesn't always end up like Nazi Germany. Maybe you'll be lucky. Maybe it'll only be, like some banana republic in Latin America. But the fact is, this is not a good situation to be in. You have to keep these two things separate.
Carter, what are your thoughts? And perhaps I can layer on another piece to it. So react to Corey, give me your thoughts. And then, were you surprised by the lack of call out that this received prior to tonight?
Yeah, I am, because ultimately this, and I'm building off of what Corey's saying. How does this happen? Because, this is, Corey talked about the examples of countries that have wound up there. He's, Belarus is going through it right now. This is, the challenge of democracy switching to dictatorship. Why does it happen? How does it happen? And it's happened virtually everywhere, right? Like, democracy is a fragile state. Tyranny is easier. In terms of world history and human history, we are far more likely to be governed by tyranny than we are by democracy if you look at human history. So it's about breaking down the institutions, and that's what made tonight so very, very scary. Is that you've actually broken down the institutions. You've broken down the media. The media have given up on reporting this shit. Trump breaks social norm. Okay, what does it even mean anymore? We're not going to report that crap. So they leave that out. That's massive. That's huge. As soon as you've got the media no longer reporting where these norms that are being pushed away, and then you've got government institutions. Right. So we've been talking about the weakening of the post office. The weakening of the post office. It's only the post office. Who even uses the post office, right? Well, tonight was the weakening of the Secret Service. Right. Tonight was the weakening of the professional administrative staff that serve the president. We are seeing, we saw ICE agents separate families. We're seeing police officers marching on protesters, unarmed protesters, and launching tear gas so that the president can go to a church service. We're seeing these things that are lurching towards tyrannical. And no one's calling them out. The senior leadership of these administrations, of these organizations, aren't saying, "I'm sorry, sir, my troops aren't going to do this. My men and women aren't going to stand with you because we're not going to break these norms. We're not going to break the Hatch Act, or we're not going to break what we perceive to be, federal law." And because William Barr tells them to do something, it's getting done. So this is what I'm concerned about in the next 90 days, right? The election's a thing. It's going to happen. There'll be an election. Someone will win. Someone will lose. But what if the winner is usurped by the loser? What if the loser says, "You know what? The election was stolen from me"? That's where these institutions have been in place to say, "I'm sorry, we're not protecting you anymore. We're not, the Secret Service doesn't stand with the loser anymore." These things have to happen in an orderly fashion, and they only happen because the institutions are strong. And the institutions today are markedly weaker than they were 4 years ago.
Corey, any reaction to what you just heard from Carter, specifically about, do you feel like this, did it give you the same chilling effect that it kind of gave Carter? Not to put words in your mouth, Stephen, but I just want to hear Corey's reaction to this.
I think it probably chilled me as much or more than Carter. Having campaign signs on the White House lawn, contextualize that. I mean, Americans who are Republicans, think about if Barack Obama had, the Obama logo on the White House. How, that O with the fields, how would you feel about that? You would be lighting your hair on fire. Canadians, think about if Justin Trudeau had the Liberal Party logo on the front of the Parliament buildings. How would you feel about that? And this does feel like a crossing of the Rubicon. And I don't mean in the sense of towards tyranny, although it's obviously a pretty big step towards a less democratic government. I mean in the sense that the Republicans have now done this, and nobody has called them on it, at least not yet. Somebody else is going to do this again. You've got this erosion, and again, Republicans, what if it's the Democrats who do it next? This is a bad thing. This is a bad thing that you were blurring these lines like this, because I said, talk about that backdrop. Money can't buy that backdrop. What is the value of that? What is the equivalent political contribution you got from your federal government to the governing party? That blurring,
the RNC.
That is incredibly significant. And, even setting aside all of the parks people who have to be involved, all of the White House staff, all of the money that an event like that costs that is going to your public, forget the bills they're going to show. There's always shadow costs beyond that. And then to have over the Washington Monument, Trump 2020 I just can't even believe that anybody's talking about anything else. I sincerely can't. This is just so wrong. And, Again, imagine if the Liberals here, right, over a Canadian, we don't have any bloody monuments. We're Canadians. We don't have that kind of stuff. But it's, I just can't imagine that this would be considered okay in the context of any normal democracy. I don't.
Yeah.
I just can't see it.
Fireworks over our most precious maple tree. I mean, we would go fucking nuts. Guys, I want to talk about, listen, we talk about political strategy on this show quite a bit, and I wanted to save it till the end, but Corey, you've tweaked something in me, which is, if I'm the Democrats right now, I see this happening. There's many attack angles on Trump after what you saw tonight. Are you taking this one above and beyond all? Or is this not the most effective one? Or where are you kind of trying to place this? Because right now you're in a tension between democracy and the immediate future of November. But at the same time, the immediate future of November comes November to January, which is once again the whole concept of democracy. So how are you balancing this? I just think that's a fascinating convo and wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sad to say, but no, I wouldn't be on these violations because it takes a civics lesson to understand them. And I think if you're actually concerned about civics, you're probably already not with Donald Trump. You've got to keep your eye on the prize. You can't get distracted by this stuff as much as you want to, as horrible as it is. You've got to, do your things in the background. Try to whip some people and say, like, if I'm fucking president in 90 days and you've sat on your hands and you haven't filed any Hatch Act charges, you're in a lot of fucking trouble. Like, I think now is the time to say we don't want people to be partisan, but being nonpartisan does not mean complicit in partisan acts and just not, I'm not going to touch that. Like, we need these institutions to be strong and we expect them to be strong, but you can't take the bait, right? You need to just keep focused on the issues in front of you. You need to talk about the economy that is not working for everybody. You need to talk about COVID-19, and you need to talk about the things that are actually going to move the needle with that disengaged voter that both the conventions were really designed to appeal to, that very narrow group. And they are not going to be moved. God, I mean, I would love if they were moved by the notion of the separation of the state from ideology so that you can remain loyal to the state regardless of what happens. It seems very unlikely to me.
Carter, what do you think? And perhaps an additive to that question is it kind of the Democrats' responsibility over the next, however many months between now and, let's say, January, to start being, America's civics instructor, to give them a sense of what might happen, especially if there is even a small chance that Trump, drags his heels in terms of not leaving office? What do you kind of think of something like that?
Well, one of my favorite things to talk about is this idea of the tyranny of the less engaged, right? So people who don't pay attention, who don't make informed decisions, get what they deserve, right? If you buy a car and you don't know what you're buying, you wind up with a dud, and everybody says, see, buyer beware, blah, blah, blah. The problem is you can't educate people who don't want to be educated. So educating right now is probably going to be challenging, but I spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about what they should do when Joe Biden becomes the president and they control the Senate and the House. I mean, imagining that they had full control of all three branches, or all three pieces. Do they appoint more judges? Do they make Puerto Rico a state? Do they pursue charges against Donald Trump and his cronies? Each one of these things is going to come with an unforeseen consequence. And that's my problem right now is how I'm really concerned, because if you're going to go to normalcy, if you're going to go back to where we should be, then there are going to be, let's forget about Trump just for a second, because former president, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the people around him have committed offenses. Kellyanne Conway has been named a number of times by the special prosecutor office about her alleged breaking of the Hatch Act. And do you prosecute her, or do you just say she went home early to be with her family? These are the challenges that the next administration is going to face, and my fear is both choices are bad. If you don't choose to return to normalcy and a rule of law, then you've lost it forever. And if you do, then you look like you're taking out revenge upon those who came before. And there's nothing more toxic to democracy, especially in a society that is so fractured with us versus them. Imagine a persecution of former Trump Jared Kushner gets dragged out in front for profiting through this administration. What are you going to do? Prosecute him? Pardon him? Like, it's a nightmare. Absolute nightmare.
Let's close the bracket on this detour that I took. And Corey, let's continue the conversation on stagecraft, perhaps with the frame that Stephen introduced at the top of the show, which is less about what's right and wrong, more so about what's effective. So let's talk about the effectiveness, because Trump had a few things going for him. The White House, he had that. He had a crowd.
Yep.
He had about 1,000 people out on that lawn. No social distancing, no masks. We can talk about that if you want to. He also had the fireworks, which we mentioned. What did you make of the effectiveness of the stagecraft that Trump had, with the obvious opportunities in a 73-minute speech to have cutaways, to have other visuals that would help kind of scaffold and structure and perhaps provide a crutch to the comments? I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it worked for Trump. It wasn't his most compelling trip to the stage, but you really do see a bit of a cleave on a lot of issues, but even on stagecraft, how the Democrats approached it versus the Republicans. The Democrats are very grim about COVID, and I think that that's fair. I think that makes an awful lot of sense given what's going on. The Republicans are almost in denial, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe the Democrats are too grim. I mentioned that I didn't like Biden's definitiveness. No miracle is coming. This is gonna be this way for a very long time. But the Republicans have said, like, well, we're just gonna cross our fingers and do this giant event with like 1,000 people in D.C. and we're gonna talk about maybe we'll get a vaccine even sooner. They made the exact opposite mistake. They've raised expectations that everything's fine, and Trump better hope that this doesn't become a super spreader event. So we may look at this stagecraft very differently in 2 weeks, I guess is what I'm saying, than we do right now. But for right now, let's just acknowledge it was a moment of normalcy, and that is something that's going to be very appealing to a lot of Americans. When you talk about America's back, you can't really do that if America looks different. And the idea that you've got a big crowd and a president giving a speech, and that speech is in front of symbols that have been the symbols of America for so long, and God, he was doing this just like he talked about Buffalo Bill at one point. Like,
yep.
America, you're so weird. But talking about this Western expansion across the Mississippi, and I could almost see the coonskin hat. Right? It was just really surreal. But it was very prideful in America, and it was very. Our best days are still here, and they're still ahead of us, and we love America, and that's going to be very appealing to a lot of people. The visuals matched perfectly his message, I guess is what I would say, Zain.
Carter, same question to you. The effectiveness of the visuals, the people, the fireworks. We talked about the White House. What did you make? Do you agree with what you heard from Corey?
Totally. I mean, I'd even go further. I mean, frankly, the words almost don't matter. If the visual is strong enough, the words, being connected to the visual is almost inconsequential. People see what they want to see. I mean, this is one of the reasons that Americans wrap themselves literally in the American flag. They want to be seen to be supportive of their country. They don't really particularly care that it's a nationalism that's a little bit scary in the rest of the world, but they think that this is normal. They think this is what they should be doing. And Trump doing it reinforces that thing that they want in themselves, right? It's gone a long ways from flying an American flag out front of your house, to literally wearing the American flag jacket, the pants that are constructed to look like the American flag. To me, it's almost like a sacrilege, but to them, this is the natural progression of their nationalism, and that's where they are. So Trump's visuals, bang on. The team that put together this television production, last week we thought maybe it would be a little bit of a train wreck. They didn't have enough time to do it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They had more than enough time. Their visual presentation, bang on. This is exactly what they wanted to say visually.
Carter, I'm going to stick with you for a second. You mentioned the words may not matter if the visuals are as excellent and as government paid for as they were here. So let's talk about what we heard from Trump. And perhaps let's start with, let's skip content for a second, maybe pause content for a second, and let's stick with length and tone. Because I think those were quite interesting in their own, which is 73 minutes, significantly longer than Biden, which I would call a precision strike. I think we all but classified it as such, right? He told a story, precision strike, gave you a very sharp contrast, light versus darkness. And then let's talk about Trump's tone, which I think comes in two forms. The tone of both what he was saying in terms of some of the material, but his tone very much subdued, right? More like what people have called teleprompter Trump rather than rally Trump. I want to get your reactions to both of those things. Length, what did you kind of make of that? And the tone that you heard from Trump tonight?
Trump's never been without a lot of things that he wanted to say, even if he didn't have anything to say. The man can take 5 minutes to say nothing. It's absolute gibberish a lot of the times. Writing long isn't easy or isn't hard. Like when we write a report for our clients, they can get really long very quickly. Making a long report basically means I'm not done yet because I'm not yet to the place where I've written it in a succinct fashion. I don't understand it well enough to put it all together quickly and succinctly. So I think that the 71-minute speech just kind of betrays that. It wasn't good enough to be shorter. Trump likes to speak. He likes to be in front of the audience. He does not like the teleprompter. So that was an effort for him. That was hard. That was hard work for him to get himself to that space. And he basically stuck to the teleprompter. I mean, I was looking online. There seems to be a couple of spots that he left the prompter. One of the things that I keep seeing over and over again is these are bad speeches. Right? Like, not only is he reading it in a robotic type of fashion, but it's written in a very poorly constructed style. There is no poetry. There is, there's metaphor, but I think, Corey's grade 8 metaphor comment is bang on. I mean, that's all it was. So anyways, I mean, his tone, his content, the comment that stands out for me is that, Biden is everything bad, and we have lots to fear. Those were the big themes that I kind of took away from this, and that kind of simplistic repetitiveness. I think it'll work to a degree. I'm not saying he's going to win because of the RNC, but he certainly didn't collapse and crumble as maybe I hoped in my darker dreams or happier dreams.
Corey, same question to you. Tone, length, specifically in contrast with Biden, what did you make of that?
Well, it showed it was a very normal Trump speech in that sense. Biden's was really about a moment that was very irregular, and it was this speech from a president coming, or a potential president coming to you almost intimately, whereas Trump's was shouted to a large crowd, and that's Donald Trump for you. When you think about the content, I do generally agree with Stephen, and I think it had some effective components. I think it got less effective as it went on. I think he got less disciplined as he went on. I think he got sweatier as it went on. I think he fell short as it went on. But you, like his last convention speech, and as convention speeches are prone to be, it was a really good encapsulation of the messages we can expect to see in the fall. Gone was the sleepy Joe Biden. You didn't see that anymore, right?
Yeah.
But I lost count of how many times over the 4 days that I heard about the radical left and how he's beholden to the radical left and these quote unquote progressive Democrats. I'm doing air quotes. I don't know why, because it's a podcast. You guys can't see it. But the idea that it's not just that they're Democrats, it's that they're extremist Democrats. And Joe Biden is beholden to them. And it is an ideology that has failed the cities, and the cities are crumbling. And do you want your city to look like Joe Biden's America, which to them is, every protest, every riot, all of that. And I mean, that's not a bad message. There is chaos that you see when you turn on your television. Trump not owning it by pointing it to the Democratic mayors, it might not be honest, but it makes sense. That's something that if you are sitting there looking for a reason why it's not Trump's fault, that's pretty easy. It's like, you're right. They've got a Democratic mayor, and policing is a mayoral responsibility. It's a civic responsibility. So I think there was a lot of effectiveness there. He definitely did not shy away from talking about Joe Biden. That was a big difference from the speech where Joe Biden really didn't talk about Donald Trump at all. I also thought it was classic Trump in that he had a number of accusations against Joe Biden that feel like they would be leveled against him more easily, including one. There was this weird moment in the speech where he said, he'll go and he'll hug some people, maybe even kiss them, like suggesting inappropriate touching by Joe Biden. And it's like, dude, you are a serial sex offender. Just calm yourself. And, it was, it hit the notes and it did the job. And like Stephen said, I think it was probably pretty effective in that sense. There were a few flubs, which you're going to have in a speech like that. There was...
Especially so long, one would imagine.
So long and, so weird. But he talked about how we have pioneered the fatality rate in COVID. I don't think he meant to say that. It's totally true. We'll call that one a Freudian slip. And he also at one point said, we will end our resilience, which again, I don't think he meant. And he talked about, another thing that I want to throw on the table is he talked about like this political class of liberals, these liberal elites who live in these communities removed from the world, this failed political class, he described them. And I just thought, just based on the language of private schools and all of that, I thought really rich coming from a guy who pretends to be a billionaire. And yeah. And then he talked about, I assume he meant walled off, but he talked about Waldorf compounds. So it's both a flub and a point on like the content. And I don't know, it was classic Trump. Classic Trump.
Yep. Let's strategize, because you guys already hit the content for me. You guys quickly summarizing a lot of Biden stuff, right? And language that we would not expect from any other presidential candidate other than Donald Trump, right? Like directly pointing to the fact that violence, crime, drug use, alcoholism will increase if you elect Joe Biden. Things that would have sounded comical 5 years ago, right? 4 years ago are now absolutely, we're desensitized. It's like, of course he said that. Of course that's what he believes, right? And to our earlier conversation, the best story to be told, who cares about the facts? Let's just leave them out as long as it's the best story we can tell. To that point, Stephen, let's strategize a bit. You're working for Donald Trump and the Republicans.
Oh, God.
Is this the speech you would have suggested tonight? From length to tone to content? I know you've said this before, that you're not the audience. Stephen Carter, the person, is not the audience. But as a strategist, is this the pathway that you also would have recommended?
Yeah, I mean, what else do you have, right? Like, if you don't pretend that COVID is over, how are you going to? Then you're expected to provide a solution. So you can't provide a solution, because as soon as you provide a solution now, the question is going to be, well, what the hell were you doing for the last 4 or 5 months? Trump has basically said, I stopped the Chinese virus when I stopped travel from China. He's ignored the problem. He's ignoring, 100 cases that, are now linked to the Smash Mouth concert perfectly. That's just a perfect piece of data. So he has to continue to ignore that, and he has to continue to attack Biden. And the fear so these narratives have worked for him from the beginning. Fear, attacking your opponent, making them the devil. I mean, I don't know how Biden's going to be attached to a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. and a child sex ring, but it's coming. It'll be there. So
many people are saying, Stephen.
Yeah,
many people are saying.
I'm not.
Many people.
I'm not saying it.
Are saying.
Many
Stephen.
people are saying it, but good people. Many, they like me. They like me, and as long as they like me, I'm going to go along with whatever crazy theories there are. So the problem is that some of the lies that he tells are semantics, right? So I would pull those lies out and just focus on the lies that hit. Right. If I was the Republican strategist, I wouldn't be saying, we signed this law, we created the law that was actually passed in 2014 that Daniel Dale always corrects on CNN. It doesn't matter. No one gives a shit. Right. Focus on the prize. Tear down Biden. If you're going to spend a lie on Biden. Don't spend a lie on which pieces of legislation you passed when. No one gives a shit. Focus on Biden. That would be my advice.
Two things I want to point out. Daniel Dale, Canadian, of course, from Toronto Star. So, of course, it takes a Canadian to go on U.S. television and correct the American president's lies. And number two, it is so strange to me that 10 times the amount of people who attended a Smash Mouth concert got COVID. Corey, same question to you. You're strategizing for the RNC. You're strategizing for Team Trump. Is this what you would have suggested for him today?
Yeah, he took steps towards making this less a referendum about him and more a referendum about America, or even a referendum on Joe Biden. Again, the radical left stuff, the attacks on this idea that all of this chaos it was almost sold as it's proof it's working, right? I mean, Ivanka Trump's intro remarks were like, now there's all these ads about how terrible he is on TV. That's because he's ruffling feathers. He's getting stuff done. Well, that's of course nonsense. But if it's a story you can tell yourself if you're a Trump supporter. And the idea that you would allow it to become about you, I think that's where you would fail. And in fact, the weakest parts of his speech were when he tried to make his record a success. When he talked about the border wall, it was almost, I think he was like, we've got 350 kilometers or mile. I'm sure it was miles because you guys do miles.
Obviously.
And then we're doing 10 miles a week. And okay, that's fine. But the border is like 2,000 plus miles long. So let's not pretend this wall is built. And he's just, that was weak. It was also weak when he talked about, his record. So much of when he was talking about his record was, besides the tax cut, right? It was not even legislative. It was, I've done this executive order. I've done this thing. I've done that thing. It wasn't what was promised. There was no big infrastructure act that was promised. I do disagree, though, Zain, when you say that things have changed a lot in the past 5 years, maybe 5 years. But, his 2016 speech was very similar on law and order. Very, very similar. He talked about those police officers that were gunned down in Baton Rouge, I think like the day before the convention or whatnot. He had this line which he just hit with the malice of a future dictator about how he would restore law and order in the country. And I mean, that one sticks with me obviously to this day. So, now, interestingly enough, he then went on to say he could fix all of that as president. And now he, of course, blames Democratic mayors.
Only he could
fix it.
Yeah.
So, he's got to stay away from his record. Again, he's got to keep it from being a referendum on him. He's got to keep it future focused. He's got to keep it on Biden as much as possible.
Carter, how would you slice and dice what you saw tonight from Trump as a Republican strategist? What was the key takeaway for you that you are now spinning on digital, spinning in ads? Is there a narrative section? Is there a tonal section? Is it just visuals and backdrop? What are you kind of making the set piece out of tonight?
Fear. Just one word, fear. It is a scary time to be an American citizen, and it's all because of the Democrats. It's all because of Biden. I would be pushing on it hard. I'd be, everywhere that there's unrest is an opportunity. Never mind that the actual acts of violence were conducted, a white supremacist, 17-year-old white supremacist shooting 3 protesters and a cop, and the cop shooting an unarmed black man 7 times in the back. Ignore those facts. Those were actual violence. Instead, let's focus on the looting and the graffiti, because those property crimes are far more scary to the upper middle class and the rich people, and even working class whites. It's far scarier to see agency being handed to those that aren't you. And that could motivate people. People could vote based on that fear. And that's probably what I would take away from tonight.
Corey, what's your set piece that you're extracting from tonight and trying to disseminate with your paid advertising, your organic social, everywhere you can? What is it?
They've clearly decided that it's going to be chaos in democratic cities. Right? It's not about COVID. And in fact, the number of times they even said, hey, COVID's supposed to be so bad, but they won't even do anything about these protesters. And, I think that
Do you agree with that strategy though, Corey? Do you agree with that chaos and democratic strategy?
You could do an awful lot worse than it. It is kind of
tried, tested, and true to point to people that are not in your community and say, you want to be like them? You make a decision and you're going to end up like them. What I find is fascinating about it, though, is he's the president right now. He's been president for 4 years. These Democratic mayors apparently have more power than him. This chaos is the result of them. He can't stop it. Well, I mean, he's talking maybe about sending in national troops, but there are national troops in Portland. The chaos isn't over. And it really requires you not to think too hard about the solutions that he's offering. But still, it's the best he's got right now. It's the idea that America is falling apart. And it's not his fault. It's the fault of all of those other people around there.
Carter, I've talked to Corey about this already a bit, but I want to get your thoughts. You're the Democrats. You know the storyline he's going to pitch. What are you doing? What is your retort? What are you strategizing both for message and perhaps even tactics, knowing that they're going to try to extract this and try to punt it out every way they can?
First of all, learn the lesson of Hillary in 2016. It is not about what he says. It is about what you say. So if you're going to be spending all of your time fighting with Trump or refuting what he said or trying to correct the record, you're done. COVID has given you the electoral opportunity of the decade, frankly. It's about COVID. 1,000 plus Americans died today from COVID-19. Refocus. Keep everything about normalcy, returning to normalcy, returning. The economic malaise is being caused by COVID. If you don't deal with COVID, you don't get your lives back. And people want their lives back. So, get this focus on COVID, make COVID the real enemy, and don't fall into the trap of fighting Trump's war. Trump will do what he does. You do what you do.
Corey, Democratic response. Any final thoughts?
Don't take the bait. Keep it on Trump. Keep it a referendum on Trump. Don't get defensive about it. Don't get into big arguments about the radical left. Obviously, you've got to be able to rebut those promptly and crisply. But I'm sure there are lines for that. The knock against Biden was always that he was a moderate in the Democratic convention. So there are ways to do that. It's got to be kept on Trump. This is a president who has been deeply unpopular most of his tenure, and he will lose rather than Joe Biden will win.
Yeah. Let's move into our final segment very quickly. Our overrated and underrated. Guys, are you ready?
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Carter, I'm going to you first. Post-convention TV analysis. We see it often. We see it as the gateway for cable news and media. Everyone's got a reaction to what they've just seen. Overrated, underrated? Does it move the needle?
Overrated. The pundits being out there doing punditry isn't going to move anything. All it does is it's fodder for those that already believe what they're watching. People are choosing which stations they're watching based on the analysis that they're seeing. So if they want to see a different analysis, they just flip the channel. What will be interesting is how the average everyday Americans respond. That's where the real analysis takes place at the schoolyard, at the football practices. That's where people really will dig into this.
Corey, post-convention spin, punditry, overrated, underrated? What do you think?
Underrated. At the football game, at the schoolyard, they're talking about the analysis. They're not talking about the convention. And it defines things. I can't count the number of times we've seen dial groups during debates or convention speeches that show the instant reaction of people watching it was positive or negative, and the post-election consensus, not the post-election, the post-debate consensus, the post-convention consensus is something entirely different. The post-event spin matters, maybe more than the event itself. The event provides the foundation from which you can have all of the other arguments that you want to have.
Corey, I'm sticking with you for this next one. Testimonials during the convention. So testimonials about the principle. In this case, Donald Trump, had to soften up his image. Only if you could get to know him better, you'd realize he's a sweetheart. How many times did we hear that over the 4 days? What do you make of testimonials? Overrated, underrated, specifically in the convention set pieces?
Very much like I think about intro videos. They allow you to say things that you can't say as the candidate yourself. So there's a lot of value in them there. I think that they are rated just about right. It's challenging, however, if they're not used in a positive sense, because the minute you've got somebody who you don't really know, and they're burying their soul, and it's making you feel uncomfortable, you want to change the channel. And there was at least one speaker tonight that was the case for me. It was parents, and it was a tragic story of them losing their daughter to ISIS. You know, she was abducted, she was raped for 8 months, and then she was killed. And that's tough television, right? That's not the kind of thing that you sit there and you watch for fun. And maybe it's an important story to hear, but you have to be careful how you use them, for sure, because it's easier to flip the channel on those testimonial stories if you find one that you don't like than it is the main actors.
Carter, convention testimonials, overrated, underrated?
Overrated. I think that people walk away talking about the principle. That's about it. You know, Biden's speech is what we're remembering. Maybe Harris's. Maybe we're going to talk about Pence's speech and Trump's speech a week from now. That'll be about it.
Last one to you, Carter, then I'll go to you, Corey. I'm sticking with you for this one, Carter. Consistent and reiterated storylines in conventions. So last week we saw that consistent storyline, as Corey, you'd mentioned on this podcast, over and over again at the Democratic convention. Not so much at the Republican convention. So with that being said, Carter, overrated or underrated?
Well, I think that it is about right. I mean, I'm going to take a little bit of issue with the preamble. I think that the Republicans had their story. Just they told it many different ways. Ultimately, it was Biden bad, you should be fearful. You know, it was told many different ways. I mean, they did suck up to Trump a lot. But Biden bad is still the principal takeaway, and hard to get away from that, in my mind.
Corey, what do you think? The consistent, repeated, reiterated storylines at the convention, overrated, underrated?
They're underrated. I think a lot of the weakness of the Republican convention was unnecessary if it had just been crafted a bit different. I don't know how you have back-to-back talking about criminal justice reform and keeping people out of jail if they're nonviolent offenders, and a comment like, oh, and I'm sending you to jail for 10 years if you do something to a statue. That's just totally incongruous to me, and it was unnecessarily incongruous. They could have crafted it differently. Carter, you're about to jump in.
That was the fear narrative, right? That's about reinforcing the type of crime. Like your white kid with a marijuana offense isn't going to go to jail, but those black guys around the statue are. That was just reinforcing. They weren't there for the criminal justice consistency. They were there for the race fear. That's why they were different.
All right, that's just a quick 75 minutes on the RNC. No big deal for us, of course. We'll leave it there. That's you, the people, for this week. We will see you next time.